Build America Bureau is the one-stop shop within U.S. Department of Transportation that has a couple of credit programs, the loan programs that we are able to lend to transportation projects, as well as other programs such as technical assistance program we have and grants that we administer. I have been with Build America Bureau a little bit over 3 years now. It's actually getting close to 4 years, I believe. It's a great opportunity to work with a diverse pool of projects ranging from highways, bridges, tunnels, all the way to transit, rail, EV charging stations, improvements at ports, airports, and even recently transit-oriented development such as mixed-use development, low-income housing, and so on. Before coming to the Bureau, I was with Virginia Department of Transportation for about 8 years. As I mentioned earlier, most of the programs that we administer are loan programs. They are a little bit different than grant programs. What we do is to help public sponsors or private companies that want to invest in infrastructure projects leverage the funding, the grants that they have in place. The new legislation has basically just given us the same authorities that we had in the past, but with a little bit more money and expanded eligibilities, that now we can finance different types of projects. Still, we think our overall capacity is about $110 billion or so worth of lending capacity that we have. We have about $15 billion in terms of tax-exempt bond allocation that we can allocate to transportation projects. The way that our budget works is we get, for example, for a program that is called TFIA, and it's mainly financing highway, transit, even port and airport projects. We used to get $300 million a year before this legislation was passed, and that would allow us to pay for subsidy cost of these loans. Any loan that we underwrite has a subsidy cost for us because these loans are low interest rate loans. They're very flexible, low interest rate, and we're subsidizing them. As a rule of thumb, every dollar that Congress gives us, we can lend about $40 to $50 based on that $1. And that $1 allows us to subsidize the cost of a loan that's $40 or $50. So that $300 million a year in terms of annual budget would translate to something around 15, sometimes maybe $20 billion a year that we can underwrite in terms of new loans. We have some money accumulated over time that's available to us, and we are receiving some new money over the next 5 years. So when we look at the entire pot, we think we still have about $110 billion in lending capacity that we can use to finance infrastructure projects, particularly when the interest rates are low in current environment and inflation rate cost of CPI is high. That's an environment that every year that you advance a project, you build it faster. If you are just paying, let's say, 2% on the financing cost, but you are saving 5, 6, 7% on construction cost escalation, that means overall the entity is saving money. Because if they wanted to wait to have access to the funding that would be available to them 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, or 10 years down the road, that project, the cost would go up significantly higher than what they're paying for interest on. Again, another good example is they can borrow the exact same money that they're planning to spend 10 years down the road to build phase 2. They can borrow against that funding in the future, build everything today, combine everything, have economy of scale, save on construction cost escalation, save on all of those soft expenses, and overall make the project cost less than a phased approach and deliver everything faster than what otherwise they could deliver it. About financing projects rather than cash funding their projects. These programs, they can expedite delivery of projects. As I mentioned earlier, in many cases, if resources are not available, project sponsors tend to push back development of the project until the resources are available. That's one way to do it. The other way is to build them now, and then when the money is available in the future, pay back the loan. We need to be careful, though, because what I'm talking about is building projects that are shovel-worthy projects, building to them that there has to be checks and balances in place to select the right projects. Also talk about rural roads that in many states, they do not have, safety features. The shoulders are not wide enough. And because of that, the accident rate, fatality rate might be high. Many states are trying to fix that issue, but of course, it's not something that can be fixed overnight. And they're doing it on an annual basis, set aside some budget, they try to fix it. That's a good question. And I will take advantage of this question to actually a little bit about the new legislation and how this legislation is different than previous legislation. One of the aspects of this new legislation is the fact that it is putting more emphasis on modernizing infrastructure in the U.S. And what I mean by modernizing infrastructure is, well, traditionally, we have known infrastructure as roads, bridges, pavement, asphalt, concrete. But that's not the only type of infrastructure that is needed for 21st century. While we still need roads and bridges and tunnels, while we still need rail, ports and airports, we need to think about how we can take advantage of technology, how we can take advantage of some of the changes, innovative solutions that are around us now and we have access to them to meet the needs that we have for a modern, world-class infrastructure that we know they are coming. For example, electric vehicles and the infrastructure needed for digital technology and the need to make sure that we have the backbone for autonomous vehicles in the future, for the smart roads and a smart infrastructure in the future. Change, moving from diesel to electric, is allowing people to better take advantage of the land, the space that's available, which we all know it's also very scarce in big cities, in urban areas. The thinking is shifting toward focusing on outcomes, focusing on innovative solutions, focusing on creating more efficiencies and getting best results than just building necessarily just move more cars. Now they're thinking outside the box and they're thinking much larger to see bigger picture and how these different pieces of puzzle can come together to create a more modern and 21st century type infrastructure. Our programs are specifically focused on transportation projects. We cannot finance a broadband program that does not have any transportation elements into it. But we can finance projects that are transportation related. I mentioned earlier that the right-of-way that exists along highways, along roads that state DOTs or localities manage, that is precious. It can be used for broadband deployment. However, there has to be some transportation use as well. Any digital needs that the corridor may have, ITS, smart roads in the future, all the sensors that need to be installed on that facility. So I got my bachelor's degree in civil engineering. And I know when I was studying in my undergrad, I really liked designing bridges. And that's where I took a couple of courses. I was doing real estate development on the side myself. But after I graduated, I really never practiced civil engineering as a career. I wanted to work with people. I wanted to be out. I wanted to think about how these projects can go from A to Z and not just focus on one element, which is designing these projects. So I decided to go to University of Maryland, do my master's degree in project management. And that's where I started learning a little bit more about management delivery area. Next for me was to join Virginia Department of Transportation. I mentioned earlier, I had graduated from master's degree at the time. Next thing I know is that I became director of that office and then deputy secretary of transportation in Virginia. It was a great journey for almost 7-8 years. That was a time that I felt that I had achieved everything I wanted to achieve in Virginia. Entrepreneurial side, co-founding that company that is pretty strong even today. It's moving forward. I'm not involved in day-to-day activities, but Brian is managing that company and it's moving forward. And on the career side, almost 10, 11 years of experience being in a public office, in a public position, serving Virginia Department of Transportation and U.S. Department of Transportation. There are a couple of tips that I can share with them. These are the type of things that I followed myself. One is always have a plan and develop a plan to adjust your path as needed, because every year we learn more information, we gain more experience. But overall, that has always been my goal, to always think about what is new, what is happening. What is needed is to be patient. Don't try to go up fast and quick. sometimes you really need to work on basics. You need to create a good foundation. Get yourself out there, volunteer for new work. That's something that I've always been doing. If something comes up that I think I can learn from it, I would volunteer myself. And this in the past, I don't know how to do it. No, I mean, you can get out there, especially if you have good mentors, especially if you have a good team that will help you. Good mentors who can help you to go through this journey is really valuable, because it is really hard to achieve all of this just by yourself. You need a team. You need mentors. You need to work in an environment that would allow you to grow. I mentioned it in the last comment I had. I have always tried to put myself around the right people and really focus on the teamwork. I think that's the key. Mentoring is important because you want to make sure that you are creating, you are training, you are helping to grow the next generation of leaders. And I'm mentoring a couple of people myself, and I've always had that opportunity to see how they are growing and how they are learning. Myself, I know that the value of personal connections, whether it's with your own team, whether it's with your own peers in your organization, other peers outside the organization, is more than anything else. Because at the end of the day, we all establish long-term relationships in our career, and trust, credibility, we can see extraordinary results.